Hi, I'm Suzanne Turner, and welcome to a podcast delving into the personal narratives within the clinical research industry. Through candid interviews, we'll learn about the personal journeys and motivations of individuals who have chosen this profession, what I like to call their why. This podcast is not just for industry insiders. It's for everyone curious about the human side of healthcare. Beyond the industry's negative reputation, we'll shed light on the dedicated professionals behind clinical trials. Join us as we uncover the heart and passion of those working tirelessly behind the scenes in clinical research. Welcome to Heart of the Trial. Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to Heart of the Trial, where we dive into the human side of healthcare, highlighting the voices often left out of the spotlight. I'm your host, Suzanne Turner, and in this episode, we're joined by Dr. Noah Goodson. With a PhD in neuroscience and a passion for transforming outdated clinical research practices, Noah brings a rare blend of scientific rigor, entrepreneurial drive, and human-centered thinking. We dive into the art of designing smarter trials, the power of technology to reduce patient burden, and why innovation starts with empathy. I hope you enjoy, and until next time, stay curious and stay compassionate. Hi, Noah. Welcome to Heart of the Trial.
Hey, happy to be here.
Why don't we start by having you tell our listeners what it is that you do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here today. Have a little conversation. It's always people always love talking about themselves, so it should be great. Yeah,
I'm sure it will be.
No, I'm Dr. Noah Goodson. I'm a principal of strategy and advisory at Thread, and that sort of vague title practically means that I work on both strategic components, both for our company and for our clients, and I work in advisory services, which is really just basically consulting. So I like to tell people, like, my job is kind of like a triangle, and if you imagine like 1/3 being like a sort of McKinsey consultant, 1/3 is like building a business and being an entrepreneur, and 1/3 is being a scientist. And then you're always sort of rotating in some combination between those three different kind of segments of work. So work might involve doing a podcast, but I think more often than not, we're working with clients on how they actually design their clinical trials and how they take their endpoints that they need, the actual data they want to collect, and pair that with pragmatic considerations around the people that are in the trial and the technology that's available to actually bridge between the people and the data you want to collect. So how do you string together a study that actually makes sense and works for everyone involved, whether that everyone is a data manager, whether that everyone's a principal investigator, and of course, critically, the track and the experience of participants within a trial, so that we can maximize engagement and retention, so that folks actually stay involved, the data gets collected, and we're able to make conclusions about safety and efficacy of a medication or a medical device.
So when you say like endpoints, are you talking about like the results that they're hoping to get out of this trial? Like, so that it cures the cancer, or that it improves someone's blood sugar, or et cetera?
Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of language in the clinical trial space. Endpoints is one of them. Endpoints basically is a fancy way of saying the data we're trying to collect. So there are lots of different kinds of endpoints. So you can imagine in a cancer trial, there might be a scan to see if the tumor has shrunk, and how much the tumor has shrunk is a very easy one to imagine. Okay, the tumor is 30% smaller, or the tumor has gone away. Now we know that there's an effect. It could be blood work. Hey, you had this marker before, now you don't have it, or you didn't have it and now you do. But there's also kind of other endpoints called clinical outcomes assessments, or electronic clinical outcomes assessments, which are ECOA. And those might be softer things. It might be like, did I get more sleep or less sleep? Do I feel better or more energized? What was my experience like? And all the things you see when a drug gets approved to market,
Right.
or if you see drug marketing, those all derive from the endpoint. So when you hear it may reduce your risk of this, that's because an endpoint said, hey, your risk of this went down. And when you hear the side effects, those are also collected in a trial, like may cause nausea or vomiting or whatever wonderful list of side effects. Those are all things that were collected as part of the trial, whether they're actually endpoints or whether they were adverse events, bad things that happened as a result of taking a medication.
Right. And how do you so pretty much you're helping, let's say, a sponsor develop that. So they come to you and they're like, hey, we want to do a trial that reduces this, and you help them design every piece of that from scratch.
I have done that in the past. At this exact moment, I'm not usually doing that. In a clinical trial design, there really are a lot of different folks involved. So you can think at the very base level, right? You need clinicians involved, people who understand what the disease state is like and can help say, hey, to test that this disease is changing or improving, we need to pick these clinically relevant pieces of data. We need to know in the cancer case, right? Like whether it's blood markers for it or tumor size or spreading or all the other kinds of things you would want to test for. So you start with that really clinical perspective. There's a team that I work closely with here that are patient-centered outcomes research. And so they really do help select and create new endpoints. So let's say you're studying a rare disease and you need to decide what kind of questions do we ask about how this disease is working. You have to actually go and create a validated kind of survey to say, hey, in this rare disease case, these are the kinds of questions we have to ask to make sure that we're from baseline before we give them the drug to after we've given them the drug or whatever else, there's really a change that means something in this specific disease. That really means that their life experience has improved in some way in this case. So I work closely with those folks, but oftentimes I'm a little bit more at really the practical end of implementing a trial. You've got a protocol, it's mostly together or it's largely together, and you're trying to figure out how to execute that. And the company I work for, the role I'm in is at a company that's a technology company. And so you're trying to integrate the technology with all the other people who are involved in the study. So because you've got your nurses, you've got your doctors on site, you've got your participants, maybe the study has some remote aspect to it, or maybe it's all occurring on site. And you're trying to make all these kind of almost tactical decisions on how you execute against collecting that data effectively. And that's really the piece that I probably work in more often these days.
That's amazing. So that's a lot of moving parts. How did you get into that? Like what was your pathway that led you to this? Because that's a lot. That's a lot of things.
Right. Well, if my job title sounds made up, it's kind of because it is. I mean, roles like this are just they're very, very important, but they're also like there's not like a totally linear career path. There are, I think, very denoted career paths within clinical research, especially at organizations like clinical research organizations, CROs, where you become a project manager and then you become a project director and you kind of work your way up those ways. That was not the path I took. So I guess it probably starts with my PhD. I was doing my PhD in neuroscience and was doing sort of basic science research on retinal development, just really in the weeds, with mice and everything like that. And I had looked at going to medical school really seriously and ultimately decided for my life that I didn't want to be in school for another decade, roughly between that and so I was like, I think I need a job. And I felt at the time, even though there's a lot I loved about academia, I wanted to do something with a little bit more, I think, variety and flexibility and dynamism. So, and I had some connections through my university at the University of Colorado, or Anschutz School of Medicine, and they had some programs there related to clinical research, and so I got involved in one of those programs and really got my kind of dipped my toes in to the clinical research space. And when I did, I realized, hey, this industry is really a pretty cool space for your career because there's tons of latitude for different kinds of jobs. And there's a huge range of roles from jobs that are become very, very stable, and you can work from home and you can raise a family and you still work hard, but you can create a very stable life, all the way up to like, you want to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Like, you have that career potential if you want to follow that path, or you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to create businesses. And I think that I was attracted to, that was one of the things I was attracted to, was the latitude of career potential in this industry. I think is quite broad. The second thing,
and kind of rare. Like you don't find that in a lot of industries.
Totally. The second thing I was really interested in, excuse me, I got to power up with some coffee here. The second thing that I was really interested in is that I found the industry to be really antiquated. And I say this with like deep kindness towards the clinical research industry. But even from a technology perspective, from a design perspective, when you look at the experiments we're doing and you just take a purely scientific lens, they're really easy. Like, the stuff that people are doing in labs every single day in terms of experimental design complexity is wildly more complicated than even the most complicated clinical trials. However, it's still very hard, and it's hard because you're overlapping a bunch of complicated systems together. So it's not hard because clinical trials, in terms of a design, once you learn to read a protocol and you understand, okay, in protocols, there's always something called a schedule of events or a schedule of assessments, right? And a protocol, by the way, just in case your listeners don't know, a protocol is what every trial is run on. You have to write down before you do the study exactly what you're going to do, exactly when you're going to do it, exactly how you're going to do it, and then you have to, and how you're going to analyze that data in the end. You can't just make it up later or just randomly collect stuff. You have to have a very specific plan that gets approved to be safe and appropriate to do on humans. So,
and then you can't deviate from it.
You cannot deviate. In fact, if you do, you have to fill out paperwork.
A lot of paperwork, and you got to notify all the proper authorities. Yeah, I've kind of told the listeners before, it's almost like the Bible to a study.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Like you follow it. Yes,
right.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So in a protocol, if you open a protocol, when you open a protocol, what you see is usually a big PDF or a Word document, and it's like somewhere between 85 and 175 pages.
It's very big.
but there's everything in there is kind of important to some degree. But there's really some central pieces you can look at, which is who you're doing the research on, what the endpoints are, what the data you're trying to collect is. And one of the best ways to kind of see what a protocol is going to be is to go read the schedule of assessments or schedule of events. Now, what that is if you imagine there's a grid and there's dates across the top, but that might say like screening, enrollment, baseline, visit 1, visit 2, visit 3 through whatever. And then there's everything you're going to do in the trial along a column if you're on the screen, on the left-hand side of your screen. And then there's kind of usually X marks beside what days you do that thing on, right? So let's say we'll go back to the example of a cancer study, and we're doing an MRI screening. You're going to do an MRI screening at your screening visit. You're going to do it at baseline, and then you're probably not going to do it every single visit. You're going to do it once a month or something. And so that's marked in your protocol. So when you read these, though, there are a lot of things you're doing because you're doing all these tests on people, but they're not actually that complicated, and they're pretty standardized in how they're structured. And once you've learned to read a protocol, you can kind of go to any protocol anywhere in the world, and you pretty much know what they're doing in the trial. You might have a question about a specific assessment, like, oh, how's that done? How does this neurological test work in the doctor's office? But you can pretty much understand what's happening in the study. And they're not that complicated, but deploying them and implementing them and doing them the right way effectively is really hard. And what that's resulted in is an industry that's super, super behind other analogous regulated industries, particularly from a technology perspective. And so for me, coming into this, I was like, okay, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for innovation that makes a difference, because it being antiquated is not non-trivial. It has real side effects. It adds time. It adds money. It makes it worse for people involved in the trial. It makes it worse for the people that are running the study, but most importantly, it makes it worse for people who are in the study, who are oftentimes already sick, already having a hard time, already taking care of a sick child that is so sick, they're in a study for an experimental medication. Like that's a tough situation to be in. And then to have annoying paperwork or technology that doesn't work or having to go into the doctor's office super, super, super frequently. These all add to burden and make it worse for folks. And that not only is bad for those folks involved, but it slows down the process of drug development to be able to get new things out to market that are safe and effective, or quickly realize it's not going to work and put that money somewhere else. So I think for those reasons, these kind of vague phrases like be patient-centric or these kinds of things, they actually really, in practical terms, when they're implemented effectively, what they do is they speed the process of developing new medications, which is not about pharmaceutical profits for me. It's about actually getting life-changing things to market for people who have no hope or whose lives are going to be meaningfully improved by these sort of new available treatments.
Yeah. And so, do you feel like you've seen that change? Like that's what made you want to come into it, because the change needed to happen. It needs to be updated. Do you feel that you've seen that?
I think it's been do I think that I've seen that? I think that in some ways we're making progress. It is really slow and it's really challenging. There are real kind of fundamental drivers of why that's the case in the systems that are in place, but also in the incumbent companies and organizations that have power and have money and have a vested interest in how the industry is currently structured, because their corporate profits or whatever else depend on it. And so it takes a lot of work to drive forward changes that really require a different approach to systems. So I think in some ways we're making progress. In some ways it's definitely a frustrating slog to try and push real differences, but particularly when there's economic headwinds, because people feel less risk. They're more risk averse. They don't want to try new things. They want to do something that's always been tried and true.
Yeah. That's understood. And do you think like this actual systems, physically the systems, like the data management systems, the electronic data capture systems, like, do they have a lot to do with it? I feel like I've noticed some improvement in the industry where companies they're thinking about making these things work together better to make things more efficient. But do you feel like you're seeing stuff like that? And if that's one of those main hindrances?
Yeah, I mean, I currently work at a company and I'm there because I really believe in the mission of that. And that company is all about collecting data within studies and trying to put it together in one system as much as possible.
Yes.
I'm not pitching my company. No, I'm just, for context, we provide a software in trials that can collect data. So that could be collecting data from participants or from research sites. You can do telehealth calls, so think of video call with your doctor, but it's measured. It's inside the same app system. You can sign your e-consent, so everything you have to consent to in the trial, you can sign that electronically. All of those pieces of data capture. Maybe you get reminders and alerts, like you get a reminder, hey, don't forget to fill in your food diary today. And then you in your app, and you open your app and you do your food diary. And then maybe instead of going into a site, you do a video call with your doctor. Maybe you're wearing an Apple Watch that's picking up your heart rate. Like all of those things integrated into a single system is one of the ways that we're trying. And it's only one piece of the pie, but it is one of the ways trying to push that forward so that there's more optionality in how you actually deploy and design your studies. And so as a participant, you're having really ease. You're not having to manage, keeping up with paper or submitting things like this, or ideally you're also reducing the number of times you actually have to go to the doctor so that you
which can resist people. Like people don't want to participate when they have to go in all the time and they're trying to work. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely trying to make a change. And I think that compared to, pre-pandemic world, I think there's a lot more broad acceptance because people do it in their everyday life. Like if I'm going to go to the dermatologist or something, ideally I'm going to shoot my doctor a message and have a video call and not have to go in unless it's really serious. And I think as that primary system of the primary healthcare system, how people engage with that evolves, there's more space for the clinical research to have kind of analogous functionality and features, and people are used to it and they feel safe and good about it. And so I do think that there's there's definitely an evolution that's happening. It's just incremental versus sort of being monumental, or I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. And so that's what you do in your day-to-day life,
Mm-hmm.
and how you got there. So what are your goals moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
So is it just to continue this innovation? Because you also, which we haven't brought this up yet, but you actually have a podcast as well.
Yeah, I did. It's been on pause for a while, but I've had I've run 2 different podcasts in the past that were a lot of fun. So yeah.
Yeah. So what's your next steps with your career and your goals within the industry?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for myself, one of the things I found that I really enjoy is building businesses and taking them from one space and putting in place the systems and the culture and the values and innovation, and kind of creating a team around that thing can collectively go out and do a lot more than I can do on my own. So I have a real joy and passion for that. And I will probably continue down a path of trying to help organizations grow, and so that they can better serve and drive innovation in this space. I'm not necessarily stuck in the technology space. I think that's where I am right now. And I think there's a lot to do there, but there's other service aspects of this industry that I think have a lot of potential to also advance and innovate how we serve, to make trials really, for me, more easy to access for everyone, and more inclusive, that anybody who wants to participate, regardless of where they live, regardless of their socioeconomic or other sort of background, they're able to participate.
Yeah, I love that you're doing that, because something that for any of our listeners that may not be aware is something that you mentioned about the protocol is they have to say who they're trying to help, and they have parameters outlining who can be in a trial.
Yep.
And these things have to be taken into consideration. If someone's struggling financially and they work a 9-to-5 job, getting in to these visits is difficult. So being able to spread that to areas outside are the most convenient, because not only that, but these investigators are spread out. Like, let's just take the US, for example. They're spread out all over the US.
Right.
So it could be 3 states away is the closest doctor who's participating. So I love that you're really aiming on trying to improve the accessibility to patients, because that's who we're trying to help at the end of the day, right? Those end users.
Yeah.
So, so kind of in line with that, though, it sounds like you definitely intend to stay in this space. Like, what is your primary motivation of staying in the space? What's your, what gives you the good feels and keeps you going?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, if you come into clinical research, anytime you're going to be, if you're looking at this industry, anytime you're going to be dealing with something that is complex, overlapping systems. And when I say that, you think like there's a pharmaceutical system, there's what the investment markets are like really impacts our industries. What the currently, let's say, how do I say this nicely? There's uncertainty at the FDA and other important organizations. The healthcare systems in not only the US, but globally, and how those are functioning and how they're working for people. All of those pieces together actually end up impacting your job in really meaningful ways, kind of no matter what you do in this industry. Even if you have a very internalized job as a data manager or something, right? Like, you're still going to really be impacted by this environment. And so you do kind of need some sense that what you're doing is valuable, because a few roles in this industry, you get to work directly with patients, but a lot of them, you actually never see the people that you're helping. I think for me, there are probably layered motivations. I think I believe in the sort of large vision of what I'm trying to accomplish to make trials faster and cheaper and more accessible to everyone. I think that mission is like very motivating to me. And I personally just made a decision I was going to work in this industry for at least a decade and then kind of check back from there. So I'm like halfway through that. We'll see where I go from there.
How close are you? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think that, like, that sort of just personal commitment for me is like part of just like, hey, I'm going to give this a run and we'll see where we go from there. I think that I like enjoy the work that I do though. Like I really like, I like the teams I work with. I work with really, really, really amazing people. We have super, super cool clients who are trying to really push forward things. And there's definitely frustrations. There's definitely challenges, but the overall of it is a lot of fun. You're taking thorny, difficult problems for people and you're really solving them, and you're making it easier for folks who are stressed out in their job or stressed out trying to launch a trial to actually do that. And then it's going out in the world and the data is getting collected. And I think for me, that's pretty rewarding.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Do you run into, you've mentioned some challenges. What are some of the challenges that you do run into working with these sponsors who are trying to do these trials? Like, do you find they're more financial related? Are they usually resource related? Like, what do you find is kind of the trend?
Well, I think on a case by case, every kind of interaction is going to be difficult. I mean, not difficult. Every action is going to be different. Every action is going to be different from each other. I think one of the things that's sometimes hard if you're working with a very large organization, like a large pharmaceutical company, is that understanding the power structures there can be really dispersed, and sometimes it's hard to know how to get something done, or you need like 4 different teams to all align, but they all kind of have their own motivations. And this is just a fractal. This is a fractal, like an impact of large organizations. It's not unique to our industry, but sometimes it can be it can be frustrating to want to move at speed and to have to take a long time to get everybody on board to be able to do that. I think another challenge that I find in this industry is that sometimes there's a tendency to be a little bit regressive if you're scared. And somebody said it like this. They said, well, nobody ever got fired for a trial failing by doing things the way they've always been done. But if you try something new and it fails, you might get fired. And so I think that's a gross generalization. That's not totally true. And it certainly depends on the organization. But sometimes it can be hard to get folks to innovate because it's easier in theory for them to do their job by just doing it the way it's always been done.
True.
And if you just do it the way it's always been done, you're not going to get a different result. So I think that those are two things that I sort of am navigating on a daily basis. They're not insurmountable. They're just realities.
Yeah, I think that's fair. One of the things as I worked my way up into management that I learned, and I'm sure a lot of people I've heard this, but the whys, like asking why until you get to the point where you can't answer that question. But usually when people are like, why are we doing this? Or why is it done this way? The answer is just, that's how it's always been done.
Right.
That's how it's always been done. And no one has bothered to question it. And do you challenge individuals when you run into that? Do you say, okay, this is why it's supposedly being done because it's always been done that way, but is there a regulatory reason behind it? Is there something actually backing it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like part of my job is to challenge that thinking in folks. I mean, I wouldn't say it's very direct or confrontational. It's actually usually more invitational. Like, hey, look, here's some options, and actually, if you look at the regulations, here's what it actually says. So you can make a decision. People have done it this way, but actually regulatory wise, you only need to do this. So it's up to you how you choose to proceed. I think that's part of being a consultant is you try to provide people with, and I don't call myself a consultant, but in that role, I am consulting with people.
Right.
You're providing people with the best information possible. So that they're empowered to make decisions. And you're not really making decisions for them. So I do think that challenging folks' thinking and assumptions is a big part of that. I think across the board, though, it's just all one big practice of empathy. It's about understanding. It's about understanding when navigating these things. It's like understanding the patient's need, understanding why a person at a research site is frustrated because they have 12 different logins for 12 different trials on 12 different softwares, and why that's hard for them, and why doing something one way or another actually makes their job better. Understanding their workflow, understanding how to make it easier for them when possible. Understanding that the person trying to drive innovation at the pharmaceutical company is not like some evil person or some like they're not being difficult on purpose. They're difficult because they're maybe their job. And actually, most of the people I work with in pharmaceutical companies are, by the way, lovely, amazing people. So it's maybe a bad example, but my point is there's reasons why folks, whether they're inside of your own company or another company, are behaving and motivated. And the more you can understand that, and the more you can kind of have a practice of empathy towards their life and why their job is difficult in one way or another, I find it a lot easier than to go to them with solutions that let you help them be successful and make you allies versus sort of being like, well, why can't we move faster, or whatever.
Yeah. Clashing priorities and goals. Do you get to work with sites a lot directly? Like actual talking to the sites and their needs?
So I work some with sites. I don't work a ton with them. I've done like a lot of site trainings and things. These particular days, I was doing more of that maybe a couple years ago. These days, I'm working less directly with sites. I do have a lot of friends who are running site networks or doing things like that. So I do think I see sites from that perspective. But I'm not. I'm no longer going. I mean, when I started out, I was in a site, in visits with collecting data. In my PhD, getting to be part of kind of alongside of what was happening in trials at a very fundamental level.
Yeah. I mean, you were literally at the ground level of it.
Yeah.
And so you were able to gain a lot of experience just by how the site was being interacted with then and take that into personal account.
Right. I mean, I think it really helps you imagine, we talked about earlier at the beginning, we talked about that schedule assessments or schedule events.
Yeah.
Understanding, having been on the ground with a site and know what it's like that person's sitting in a waiting room for 15 minutes and then they're sitting in an office for 30 minutes and then people are coming in and out and the person's coming in, different people are coming in. What is it like to actually be in a doctor's office with this? Because it doesn't look like X's across a Excel spreadsheet. There's an actual experience that's happening in a staged way. Oh, wait, when you get that MRI, you have to go to a totally another floor. So that person's going to have to go to another place. They're going to have to wait in a different waiting room. They're going to be checked in by, what is that actual experience like for people? Regardless of who that person is, that's, I think, at the core of being able to innovate in systems in a way that actually makes a difference is you understand why, what it feels like to be in that person's shoes, or you can at least imagine it in a visceral way. I find that drives a lot more pragmatic solutions than sort of this hand wavy idea of, well, we throw technology at it or we just make it this way.
Right. And have you actually, while working with any of your clients and stuff, I'm just curious, if you've said this to them and any of them actually almost been shocked, oh, I didn't think about it from that aspect. I never imagined myself in their shoes.
I definitely think there's been instances where a client hasn't fully thought through the implications of something. Like a great example would be a study that had like pediatric patients and had young pediatric patients where they're not going to really have their own phone. Then had older pediatric patients that were teenagers. And there are times in trials where when you have those young pediatric patients, the caregiver, is the one who's actually putting the data. Yeah, mom or dad, whoever is the one that's actually putting the data in, right? So they're saying, they slept this well last night, or they had these, they're filling out maybe a survey on their phone. They're providing that data for the study about the participant. But then you have to make a decision down the line. At what point do you go from the caregiver collecting the data to the participant collecting the data? And so there was, I'm just thinking of one study right now where it's very obvious where this client just hadn't thought about wait a minute, do I expect all 16 and 17-year-olds to have their phones, or do I expect the caregiver to still be the one doing it? And understanding the disease condition and the countries you're going to, and and also what does that mean for your data if it's the caregiver reporting it versus the participant reporting it? Those kinds of because do you switch if they're 15 at the beginning and then they turn 16 in the middle? Now do they get does it switch from the caregiver to the parent, or do they stay where they were at the beginning? And it's easy to kind of write all that stuff down on paper, but even that pragmatic handoff of, well, who's actually entering the data on their phone? Is it the caregiver or the patient at what age? Those kinds of things. I mean, that's a very, very simple example. But I think those kinds of things are really the types of things we try to help clients think through.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a little over the top example, but it is a real one that happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes it takes someone being outside of the situation to see something that may seem so. I've had that my experience myself. Like someone will say something to you and you're like, that seems so obvious or so simple.
Right.
But it just takes that outside perspective to help give you and you're like, aha. So it sounds like you're giving them aha moments.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think definitely doing that. I mean, there's a lot of tools I use in my work with clients to try and that I've kind of tried to help my company at least standardize how we approach certain problems that make sure that you don't need usually if you get the right tooling and processes in place, a lot of times you can avoid having just an expensive expert or only use them for set points in time. And you can instead really have people work through a process together to analyze what the flow is going to be through a study and where, and in the case of my company, at least, where technology is engaging with the participants and with the research site. So you can make really good decisions, because even the best written protocol is not going to contain all of the information you need to actually set it up and run it, whether you're a site, a CRO, or whatever else.
Yeah. So what do you think if someone were interested in coming into the industry right now and even gearing towards certain areas you're in, what's your feel on how things are right now? Or do you have any advice?
Yeah. I mean, I think like all industries right now around pharmaceuticals and healthcare, I think there's a lot of uncertainty. And that's driven at the most macro level honestly by politics and the subsequent economics that are interrelated with that. And you don't need to have an opinion on that, but you should know that it is impacting an industry that is a high risk industry that has to take long bets, and taking long bets when there's a lot of uncertainty is very difficult, right? Long, very expensive bets, like 5-year, $100 million investment.
Yes.
Where you don't even know what your regulators are going to look like in that time. That's a very difficult thing for anyone to do. And that's going to impact our industry. So I would say that there's definitely some hurry up and wait hold in the industry in this exact moment. But I don't think that should get people down. I think if you're passionate about clinical research, there are opportunities in this industry for you to build a really, really, really amazing career. One of the challenges you'll always face in this industry, especially if you're coming in, just trying to start your career, is that there is a tendency to trade on years of experience in this industry. So rather than trading on skill, actual ability, knowledge, potential, there are a lot of places in this industry where it's just like, do you have 5 years of experience? Do you have 10 years of experience doing this? And you have to, in those organizations, you have to, it's more about years in the saddle than how the quality of the writing sometimes. Yeah. And so, that does matter. There are places where really it does super matter. And there's no dissing on folks who have been doing this for 20 plus years. It's really amazing the knowledge and experience they bring to the table. But if you're new, it's a real challenge you have to overcome. And so learning how to cross articulate the skills you have and finding an opening is really key. Because once you find an opening and you start getting in with a company, wherever it is, it's much, much easier for your talent and your dedication and your focus to help you rise to the top. And I find that this industry is a place that there are opportunities once you get in. So if you're looking to come into the industry, just try to break in, because even if it's not your ideal role, because once you break in, if you're dedicated and you've got the chops, you will find new opportunities quickly to try and get yourself to a place that feels much more satisfying in your career.
That's amazing. That was fantastic advice. I loved it. Okay. I'm hoping you have a fun story that you can share with us. Something crazy that's happened, and working with, your different sponsors, of course, keeping confidentiality in mind. Just a fun, crazy story that maybe it's something that shocked you. Maybe it was something heartwarming, but just had a lasting impression on you? It's really on the spot, putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Well, I think like, there are like a lot of sort of fun stories I've gotten to be part of, meeting really cool people. Like in my company, I'm lucky enough to work with a huge range of clients. I get to work with government, I get to work with academia, I get to work with large pharma, cool. Biotech, CROs. I get to work with a lot of different clients. And so that gives me a huge range of folks who are doing really, really interesting things. I think from a practical perspective, I think of this one story of a trial we worked on with a large pharmaceutical company. And this particular trial was a long-term follow-up study in a neurological condition where these folks have a debilitating neurological muscular motor disease, right?
Okay.
The pharmaceutical, and it's a rare disease. So there's not a ton of folks with this. And so the pharmaceutical company wanted to be able to reach these folks no matter where they are. So some of them are near these kind of centers of excellence, right? Think like major big hospital in a big city where the top docs are. For those folks, they can participate in the trial really in a direct way, right? They can go into the site where the top docs are and they can participate in that way. This client really wanted to be kind of innovative, and they were trying to say, but we know these other folks are spread out all over the country. How do we get to them? So we worked together closely with them. We brought in another partner to be what's called a central site. And a central site is where there's a principal investigator who is a doctor who's still overseeing the study, but they're able to remotely communicate with their participants, and they might oversee participants across multiple states, right? So we used our technology at our company and this partner we brought in together to help serve the pharmaceuticals goal, which is, hey, we know these folks are all over the country. Can we make it so they can join the trial and participate, even though they can't make it into one of these, 17 centers of excellence or 23 centers of excellence, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And when we did that, what was really cool, there was a couple of really cool pieces of data. As soon as we rolled that out, they were able to really maximize recruitment. I mean, there was a huge spike in the number of participants recruited because there were these people who wanted to be in the study. They just couldn't fly to another state, every 6 months to participate. Yeah. That was the first thing that was cool. And they were able to do that by everything they did electronically. They signed their informed consent, which is agreeing to be in the trial electronically. They had telehealth calls with the central PI, with the doctor, and they completed surveys and assessments remotely in this case. That was pretty cool. So there was not only it was 7x more effective at recruiting participants than the best performing traditional site. So you get a lot more participants involved.
Yes.
It makes sense. You have a bigger reach. It was also 6.5 times faster, meaning you were getting participants in really, really quickly. What I thought was also the coolest data, though, is when you looked at the compliance data, which is a compliance data saying, hey, are people actually doing the things in the study, right? And you're trying to measure how much of the things do we want them to do versus what percentage are they actually getting done.
Right.
The folks that were participating remotely actually were 20% more compliant. They were almost basically 100% compliant with the data in this particular study, meaning that, hey, these folks really wanted to be part of the trial. They didn't have a way. The sponsor had a really innovative idea. And we worked with them and other collaborators, and we together did a thing that meant these participants could not only be part of the trial, but then because they wanted to be part of the trial, they were really good at giving their data into the study and ultimately providing a much better, robust, long-term data for this disease condition, so that we know that this already approved drug is really remaining safe and effective and having its impact in the long term. So I think getting to do something like that and see the tail of it, see it go across 3 plus years, and the results that start coming in is really, really very, very rewarding.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Holy cow. And that right there just shows why, your passion for increasing the outreach outside of centralized locations is so important, and it shows that it works and that it's doable. And, I actually feel like when I was working at this CRO still, that there was a study where they actually had they hired some kind of nurses or something, and actually had nurses going to houses because that so they were able to do remote. And that's one of the ways they made it work, is because they still had someone actually physically seeing them versus the patient going to the doctor's office. They had a nurse going to their house and doing whatever they needed to do and all. And I think that's a really cool concept.
Yeah.
And I hope that we continue to see growth in that way. And the fact that you guys had such amazing data from it that's mind blowing. No wonder it made an impact on you and was so rewarding. So
absolutely. And there's tons of innovative things, and it's all about balancing what's right for that patient population, what's right for the sponsor in that time, and what's right for the actual data you need to collect. Like, you're not going to remotely collect an MRI, but you can definitely have a nurse go. You can definitely have a nurse go and give a blood draw, right? So it's trying to make sure you balance what's really needs to be important for that patient population, for those folks. It's specific to them. It's not just a generic way of approaching things. And I think for those who want to be innovative, there's real opportunity to make a difference in participants' lives.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like this is an industry that, even if there are antiquated methods or systems like you've talked about, there's also a lot of change all the time, and having to be able to adapt to those situations. So that's a really great point. But oh, this has been a fantastic conversation. You've had such wonderful insights, and I really appreciate your time today. But before I let you go, how can our listeners reach you if they would like to follow you or get in contact?
Yeah, I think the best way is probably just LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn at Noah Goodson, PhD. So Noah
there
Goodson
you go.
on LinkedIn. I think there's only one of me out there right now, so you'll find me there. Definitely, if you have more questions or you want to chat about anything, please don't hesitate to shoot me a message. I love meeting with folks, whether you're doing something at your company or you're early in your career and you're trying to figure stuff out. I love helping people try to find their way to success in this industry if I can. So don't hesitate to ping me.
That's amazing. Thank you again so much for your time. No, I really appreciate you being on Heart of the Child.
Yeah, privileged to be here. Thank you for having me.
This brings us to the end of today's episode. I want to extend my sincere thanks to our guest for sharing their inspiring journey. If you'd like to connect with them, you can find their contact information in the show notes. I also want to express my gratitude to you for joining us on this exploration of the clinical research industry. I hope you found today's episode insightful. If so, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It truly helps us reach more listeners. If you have any feedback, questions, or comments about the show, feel free to email me at podcast@iceconsultingllc.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to having you joining us on our next episode of Heart of the Trial.